Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, my friends, once again, it's time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J.C. McCauley, along with the champions of talk this morning. We've got talk champion Jonathan Small in the house. Good morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Stan. It's good to be back here again. I look forward to it every week to get off to a new week and to a good start.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, you had a nice weekend overall.
Great weekend. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How was your weekend?
Weekend was fine. I mean, I was trying to do a lot of things yesterday to get ready for the game, and I was able to do everything that I was looking to do, but not really be able to enjoy the nice weather. You know, you're so busy running errands, doing everything. I just kind of wanted to really just sit back and relax because it was a gorgeous day yesterday. Might have been a little nippy, but not too bad though overall. This is obviously a beautiful time of the year, autumn. The leaves are starting to change colors, if you notice.
Do you do the autumn leaf drive around?
No, I don't, to be honest. You mean drive around looking at the autumn?
Yeah, drive around looking at the autumn leaves and take in autumn. I
mean, I notice it when I'm driving. I don't really plan it just to go look for it, but I'll notice the autumn.
Do a little apple picking?
No, I don't. I can't tell last when I did that. That's been a long time.
Pumpkin picking.
Maybe you teaching me. Maybe you getting me prepared to do something. Then
a little hay ride.
No, I haven't done none of that.
Get a nice apple pie.
Apple pie. You don't have to wait till the autumn for apple pie, though.
But this is apple pie season now. If you go hay ride, or you go, then you'll stumble onto the places that make the apple pies as well. You get some great apple pie. There's a great apple pie out there in the land.
Right. Well, I think I do want to appreciate Mother Nature's fall foliage this time of the year. So I'm going to actually plan next week just to go someplace and spend the whole day and just enjoy. Hopefully the weekend will be nice next weekend, which I think is going to be pretty nice. A little cold at times this morning, but overall it's still not bad, once you get into the daytime. And you caught any NFL games over the weekend?
Oh, yeah. What did we watch? I watched the Ravens. That was the last game.
Sunday night.
That was Sunday night.
That's the big game, Sunday night.
Yeah, the Ravens. Football. My wife was very disappointed. She cut it off in the middle. She says, "There's nothing happening here." I lost my interest. And so that ended at middle of second quarter. What else? But the earlier games were good. The Cowboys played L.A., right?
That was the 4:25 game.
Yeah, that was a good game. Watch that game. And the one before it was... game on before?
Was there 1 o'clock? I know the Giants was playing in London. That was like 9:30.
That was in the morning. I didn't see that game.
Yeah, I didn't watch that game either.
I didn't get that. I watched the one that came on before L.A., I think. Yeah. I still remember what team it was.
I missed that game.
It was the Dolphins.
The Dolphins was playing, was it the Jets? No, the Dolphins didn't play the Jets, did they?
I think they did, because the Emerald Green.
The Jets won that game.
Yes, they did, yes. Yeah, that was a good game. That was a good game.
Actually, Stan, you watch more football than I do, though, believe it or not, because I really just watch my team play the Cowboys. And I may watch another good game, but I think you're watching more NFL than I do.
Well, Sundays in our house is NFL Sunday. We watch football because my wife is a huge football fan. So That's what's on every television in the house.
She just got to get a team. Like, you got to be committed to it.
She likes to watch good football.
Oh, so
great execution, and that's what upset her about the game last night. Execution was off. It was worth watching.
Right. Big game next Sunday night, Cowboys and the Eagles. That's going to be one of the biggest games of the weekend. Everybody's going to be talking about that game.
So now, is it the Eagles that remain undefeated?
Yes, they are 5-0.
The only team, right?
The only team. I mean, they had somewhat of a close game yesterday. It came down to a missed field goal. But they was playing on the road. They'll be playing in Philadelphia, so I guess your father's going to be looking forward if he's still a big Eagles fan.
Oh yeah.
And
well, the football's a lot like the game of life.
Well, it's one game a
weekend. Get on the gridiron and give it your best and see who wins. Now, there's a huge contest coming up in November. Of course, it's the midterms, and of course today's Monday, which means we have special guests on Monday that Jonathan finds, a special guests from all over the country, and sometimes even from other places around the world. And we have great conversation. Today is going to be another one of those great conversations with another expert that we try to bring you at least one a week on Monday. And so we'll let Jonathan have the honors of introducing our special guest.
Well, good morning to people out there. This morning on Morning Talk Live with Jay Stan, McCauley's Talk Show, we have a returning guest who's been on many different shows on AccessTV.org network, from All About You to Face to Face. He's been on Morning Talk Live with Jay Stan, McCauley Talk Show. This is the third time, so he's well abreast in many different issues. The guest this morning is a former Connecticut Democratic nominee for governor. He's also a former council advisor for President Bill Clinton's administration, former Connecticut State Comptroller, attorney by law, no other than a political analyst, William Curry. Good morning, William. How are you doing?
I'm very well this morning, thank you, and very happy to be with you guys.
Okay, Bill, obviously you've been on the network many different times in the past, but could you still let people know a little bit about yourself and background before we get into our topics of discussion?
Sure. I'll just quickly, born in Hartford, raised in Hartford, born in Bowles Park, which is no longer with us, Manchester Street, Ridgefield Street, for people who know that neighborhood, and went to Catholic schools and college, and came back, went to UConn Law School. And the year after I graduated, I ran for the state senate, and was lucky enough to be elected. I was reelected, and then I lost a race for Congress after just after 2 terms in the state senate. I got a wonderful job, went around the country working as the political director of the nuclear freeze movement, arguing for arms control between the United States and the Soviet Union, and supporting candidates who agreed with us. Came back, practiced law, ran for comptroller, and won, and became the state comptroller, and 4 years later was the nominee for governor. I tell people I have the distinction of being the only living American to lose 2 statewide races to a multiple felon. I lost to John Rowland that year and again afterward. But in between, I'd gotten to know Bill Clinton, and he gave me just a wonderful opportunity. I was a counselor to the president in the Clinton White House, and worked with him through his reelection in 1996. And I've done other things, lots of other things. I'll stop there. I was columnist for the Hartford Courant for a number of years on politics, wrote a column for Salon.com, do a lot of writing now. Stay abreast with politics, do a little speaking, do a little writing. And I tell people that it's a pursuit that requires the engagement of all of us, politics, citizenship. Too many good people are walking away from it.
Well, Bill, obviously as a political analyst, you know the whole ins and outs of the political spectrum. We have the midterms on a national level. We have a very important statewide Connecticut governor's election and some other congressional seats. Basically, going into November, November the 7th? No, the 8th for the Connecticut, for the general election throughout the United States and also Connecticut. What's your take on the governor's race here in Connecticut between Governor Ned Lamont and Republican candidate Bob Stefanowski?
If you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have said it's going to be very close. And I would still urge anyone who cares about the direction of the state and the country to treat it as very close and get out there and fight for it, because you just never know with these things, and they can change so quickly. I tell people that the problem with making predictions is that the future is chock full of stuff that hasn't happened yet. as we sit here today, 4 weeks out, I think that Lamont is in very good shape. I think two things happened. One, the tone shifted. It looked like such a deeply Republican year. Republicans may win the House and Senate. It's really unclear today at a national level. But it's not going to be, I don't think, a big wave year. I think the Dobbs decision on abortion, I think a lot of things changed the mood of the country and made it a much more of a toss-up race. And in a state like Connecticut, that means it's a Democratic race. And so that helped Lamont. Just the national mood just shifted over the summer. And the second thing is that Stefanowski has not run a good race or offered much that I can see by way of solutions. And Ned Lamont, I think the thing that commends him the most as a candidate is he has a good heart, and strong character. And I criticize my party, state and national, for stopping short of a lot of basic social justice, systemic changes that we need to make in order to really get to where we want to be as a nation. But looking at this race, you've got one guy who I think has done a good job of the issues that are put in front of him, starting with COVID, and a challenger who's just kind of cookie cutter far right, and not much else. And so I think Lamont will be okay. Which is good news for the rest of the ticket.
Bill, obviously, I understand you're a Democrat, so you're gonna obviously be more likely in favor of the Democratic side here in Connecticut than the Republican side. But just to try to stay neutral the best you can, the arguments that I'm hearing on both sides is, let's say candidate Bob Stefanowski is saying Connecticut is in terrible shape. The economy is kind of ranked last. He's criticizing that we've had Democratic rule for governor in Connecticut for 12 years. We had the legislative rule of Democrats for 42 years, and he's indicating it's not working. We're not really ranking as good as we need to be. Then you hear on the other side, Governor Ned Lamont is saying Connecticut is in great shape. Our crime rate in the state of Connecticut is one of the lowest in the country. He's putting a lot of money in different areas of the economic sector. He's handled the COVID-19 situation extremely well. I mean, that's the promotion side that I'm hearing. Where actually is Connecticut at, in your opinion, just to be neutral? I mean, is Connecticut really in great shape? Are we moving in the right direction, or do we have some serious flaws in some areas that is really dragging us down?
We're in better shape than we think and then we say. Mm-hmm. We're not in great shape, but all the crepe hanging and hand wringing that goes on is kind of overblown. A lot of it comes out of the business community, which you would think would want to be more of a cheerleader for the state in which they're located. But we're still among the top. This is the wealthiest country in the world, and we're still among the top 3 in income, wealth, and education. Well, if you're among the top 3 states in income, wealth, and education, it can't be a terrible crisis. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not the definition of a disaster, right? To be one of the 3 best off of the 50 states. But the flip side of it is the numbers have been going down. I tell people about governors and presidents. We're having this debate at the national level right now over the Biden administration, and we're having it here over the Lamont administration. Governors and presidents have far less impact on the economy that's ongoing while they're in office than everybody says they do. If you're a governor or you get to be president, you can have a tremendous impact on the economy, but not the one that's happening right now. Your greatest impact is on an economy that will come down 5, 20, even 30 years later. Did you choose the best education system for our children? Did you choose the best transportation system? Did you fix the systems that have been strangling our cities? Did you engage in proper land use planning? Did you fight corruption and create an ethical democracy for people to engage? If you did those things, then the economy after you're gone, people won't ever give you a testimonial dinner for it or a ribbon. But that's where the payoff is in those jobs. It's in what comes much later. In the short term, it's almost impossible in some ways, and certainly very difficult to manage an economy. Connecticut's problems are long-standing, and they're in both parties. You're looking for bipartisanship. Everybody can raise their hand and admit some responsibility for how we got here. And I'll just give one example. Both in the Malloy administration and in the Rowland Rell administrations, and to some degree still continuing, we believe far too much in an economic development strategy that involves bribing large corporations to either stay here or come here. We depend far too much. You read in articles that that 70% of all new jobs come from small businesses, but that's only 70% of new jobs. The number of total jobs is below 50%, and the reason is that small businesses have such a high mortality rate. It's hard to run a small. You got these small business listeners out there. I'm sure you do. They know. And I've always believed this state should focus on reforming the property taxes and bringing down energy costs and creating letting small businesses into the state employee health care plan. There are so many things we could do. I think if we made Connecticut the absolute model state in the nation for the development and prosperity of small businesses, we really sat and listened to them. If my progressive friends really saw a kind of progressivism in which we fight to keep everything small from being devoured by everything big, then you're fighting for the disadvantaged, you're fighting for working people, you're fighting for small business, all under the same banner. And so I think that's a mistake. Connecticut's never going to play that beggar thy neighbor corporate bribery game well enough to win it anyway. Mm-hmm. So as a practical matter, we need a new strategy. And I think that's a part of what's going wrong here. But it's been embraced by, and Stefanowski's not going to champion. That's not on the table in this election because I don't hear much from either side. When we really get going again, it will be because we've adopted a whole new worldview about economic development and about cities.
Well, if you look at Connecticut as a state, our educational system, our healthcare system obviously ranks at the top. Our income per capita ranks at the top. Our infrastructure probably is lagging. They say always the cost of doing business, the regulations is very difficult in Connecticut. That's one area that we could definitely improve on. The overall economy now, I will hear reports even from Connecticut Business Industry Association saying that there has to be some improvement in areas of business growth. But we have some of your strongest assets of UTC that's located here. You have ESPN, although they may be downsizing. You have some major corporate presence of jobs here. You have a lot of manufacturing jobs, skill set issues of people not really even being qualified for the jobs. You have a tremendous airport. Sometimes people overlook the assets that you have in your own backyard. And I called a Republican conservative talk show earlier last week, and I asked them, is there more pros in Connecticut than cons? And the person said no, he believes there's more cons than pros. You don't agree with that, though, assessment. You think Connecticut obviously has more assets and more pros going for it than it has cons?
Absolutely. You may remember, Jonathan, a few years ago when General Electric left us, mm-hmm. On the way out the door, their CEO said, out of nowhere, just nobody out, he made sure he wanted to just offer the advice that he was leaving in part because we had such a tough business climate because we had such high taxes on corporations, which when you listen to CBIA, when you listen to Business Lobby, that's what their answer always is, that you have to lower taxes on corporations and the wealthy. That's the gist of their complaint. And when GE left us, so many people didn't pick up on two facts. One, GE never paid any taxes. So if they were talking about their own situation, they were such tax scofflaws, they never gave us a penny. They'd been years since they'd paid any taxes at all. So that couldn't possibly have driven them out of the state. And they were moving to Boston. They were going to Massachusetts, which was a higher tax state. Mm-hmm. And they're going to Massachusetts for the reasons that corporations consider first. It was number one, it was a better magnet for the kind of talent they needed to create. And pardon me, they needed to attract in order to stay competitive. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. When Pfizer was going to do a huge development in New London, and New London went through a civil war over it. This is many years ago now. We gave, and the state offered them everything possible. And New London Civil War was over a takings case, the Keogh case, and the city was deeply divided about the amount of the neighborhoods, the houses that were taken from New London residents to be given to the project. We gave them everything they asked for, and then they left anyway. And they left the city just, to deal with all the wounds of the fights over that. And so when you listen to people complaining about these things, you have to just remember that they all have a dog in the fight. They all have something that they want out of this. I'm an old guy now. I started in the state Senate when I was 26. Every year I've been in politics, I've heard those same complaints. Suffice to say, they're overstated. But the piece about small businesses that they have, small businesses don't pay corporate income tax. Almost none of them pay a penny in it. They pay property taxes. By far and away, property tax is their biggest tax. And we are far too property tax dependent. We are second worst to Mississippi in the amount of the local education budget paid for by the state, and for some of the same reasons. They want to leave poor children behind, I'm sorry, let me take that back. But they don't think enough about poor children and what our obligations are as a state to do what I think would be the right thing for everybody and would work better, especially small businesses and homeowners and cities. They need to bring down healthcare costs for small businesses. There are lots of ways we could do that, and we've chosen not to. We need to make working capital as well as investment capital available to small businesses. But even the successful ones have trouble walking into a bank, and especially if they're located in a city, and cities ought to be the very center of our economic development strategies. And so there are lots of things we could do, but it's not what the GE and the CBIA and the Pfizer guys are complaining about. It's a whole other set of issues that affect a whole other different set of people, I believe. And so there's a lot to be done. And the people who criticize where we are correct. They overstate the crisis. Connecticut's still a good place to live, and it's a good place to do business. But there are a lot of problems for business people that need to be corrected beyond a doubt. And there are state policies that we need to change that we haven't yet. Sorry, that's a really long answer, but there you go.
Good answer, though, Bill. Good answer. Bill, you hear the arguments, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, that Connecticut, our state government, is too big. They made some comparisons that we're very close towards our employment sector for state government in Connecticut, comparable to North Carolina, which is almost double, if not triple, the population base. Is there a benefit to having a big government sector in a small state, or would we be better off having less state employees? I know we got some tremendous issues in our pension systems here in Connecticut, but what's your overall take when you hear arguments that Connecticut state government is too big for the size of our population?
First of all, this is something I wish progressives were stronger on. All government can be pared down. The cost of overhead in healthcare in the United States, we spend a third of every healthcare dollar on overhead, paperwork, and to some degree, and to a too significant degree, profits. The only other country that comes even close to that is Canada, and their overhead is half of ours. Half. If we could just bring our overhead down to 16, 17%, if we could just tie Canada for last place instead of having it all to ourselves, we could bring every uninsured person into healthcare and lower every premium paid in the state. And that requires systemic change. It requires taking on some special interest. It requires us doing a lot of things that we haven't done, and that we very much need to do. But somehow, I think because of the role of money in politics, never quite makes it onto the agenda. And as far as the overall size of government, let me just add one thing, and that is, in terms of the number of employees, I'm not sure where it is now, and I'm not paying as much attention to the budget as I did when I was comptroller and state senator running for governor. But I can tell you that over time, the number of employees has gone down substantially. It's a small, when people talk about government, they picture the bureaucracy itself, the number of people working for it. and that has actually shrunk. And number two, the amount that actually goes to salaries, I'm not going to throw out a figure right now because it's not fresh enough in my mind, but governments are basically check writing operations. The money goes to Medicaid, the money goes to schools, the money goes through the government and out the door. What you said, Jonathan, about pensions is really big. And when I was comptroller, I actually got a commission done. I fought for this, didn't win. But because we were incurring debts, running up debts, not paying our way, not paying as we went along, we pay too much money to debt service in this state, both for pensions and for other debt obligations. We're far too high on that. And that's a conservative thing that progressives ought to be for. Every dollar you have to spend on debt is a dollar you can't spend to help somebody. You can't spend it to plow a highway or teach a child. And so there are those aspects. Again, the bureaucracy, the overhead cost in healthcare, and the cost of debt relief. And the biggest one of all is the cost of corruption. There's a guy named Malcolm Sparrow up at Harvard who studied corruption in the healthcare sector. He estimates that 12% of all Medicaid spending, Medicaid's a big part of our budget. He says that 12% of it goes to fraud, and not from the patients, from the doctors and the labs overbilling. And just getting this state or any state to really do oversight, to root that out and change it. Oversight, even more than the pensions, even more than healthcare. And those are the three big things: the pension debt, healthcare, and the cost of corruption. But you have to go in with a real attitude of reform to root this stuff out. That's where the overspending is. It's not because some poor guy doing highway construction's living too large a life. Okay, it's not because we need to beggar our own workers. That isn't. If you just take the numbers, that's not enough of the problem, even if that's what you wanted to do. But in those other areas, debt, healthcare, and above all, political corruption, the cost is overwhelming. We could change those things and bring the cost of government down. We ought to.
Stan, do you have any questions or comments you want to add to the show?
I'm, always in active listening mode. But the one thing that Bill talked about was the cost of corruption. And, do you see that diminishing in any way? It takes it seems as though it's like a slow cancer. Like as time passes, there are more entities that are pulled into its web, it seems. And I think that people think of corruption as something that's, really big and scandalous, but the bulk of it is stuff that's seemingly beneath the waters. You really can't see it. It's difficult to root out without some real focus over either a long period of time or someone that's willing to go in there and risk it all to get it out. How do you fight this?
First of all, I just think that is a really important observation, and it's really true. And there was a terrible Supreme Court decision called Citizens United, in which they basically said anybody can pour as much money into politics as they want to, and in that the justice, not the Chief Justice, but Anthony Kennedy, the justice who wrote the decision, made this distinction between hard corruption, where somebody puts $100 into the pocket of a councilman in order to get a parking franchise, and soft corruption, all the money that goes into the campaigns, all the speaking fees people get, the jobs they get after they leave public office, all the money spent on lobbying. And one of the hard things to understand is that Anthony Kennedy got it completely wrong. He said government can fight the hard corruption by going after the actual petty criminals, but all the soft corruption is okay, and everybody thinks it's okay. Two things that were completely untrue. It's that subtle, baked into the system corruption that isn't, that does the most damage. It's not just the stuff that's illegal. It's the stuff that's legal but wrong. And a lot of that stuff, it's invisible till you really look hard at it. And it takes an application of attention, a quality of attention from the political leadership, and a commitment. But unfortunately, that is lacking in all 50 states and in the federal government. And this is not, we're talking about Connecticut, but this is not specifically aimed at Connecticut. But But we need to recognize, when I was running against Roland, one of the problems was that people in Connecticut, we saw ourselves then for sure as a relatively honest state. We'd look over at Rhode Island or New Jersey in our region and think, wow, those guys are all criminals. We're fairly upright here. And then we woke up one morning. It turns out we were just like Louisiana with foliage. The corruption was so baked in; it was costing us so much money. And for a while, Nora Danahy and others, there were a handful of heroes who mounted a case. And then, in the name of bipartisanship, Jody Rell, who was the Republican governor who drove through campaign finance reform, all of that helped. And the mood lasted for 3 or 4 years, and then it slowly began to dissipate. And I would say that by today we've almost completely lowered our guard. And so again, it is true. It's built into the system. If there's one great liberal reform that all liberals and conservatives ought to be for, it's campaign finance reform. It's getting private money out of public policy. That's what we need to do. And that's where it begins. And then there's bidding reforms. There are all kinds of ethics reforms in the government itself that could have a real impact. It's not because we don't know how to do this. It's because we don't want to.
You have any more questions, Stan, you want to ask Bill, or anything else you wanted to address?
No. I mean, I could, I could have a conversation with Bill ad nauseum. All right. He talked about that, but I mean, I might be steering away from where you wanted to go. But he talked about the nuclear.
I was with the nuclear freeze. Yeah.
And some of what's going on in Europe right now with the Ukraine.
Heartbreak.
This is, for the first time in a long time, we're considering conversations around nuclear war. I think when the president mentioned that we haven't been this close since 1962. I think he's introducing the conversation so as that people aren't living in a bubble or a vacuum, thinking that it can't happen. Not that it's likely to happen, but it's something that people should be aware of, because, as he says, he's done lots of has had a lot of conversations with Vladimir Putin, and he's serious. And that should wake people up to where we are globally today. I just want some feedback from you on that.
It raises so many issues. But let me just say, one of them is, and I support what the president has been doing with Ukraine. I believe we should be supporting Ukraine. I believe that I believe that we're living in an era of a wave of global fascism. Their sworn enemy is not capitalism, but democracy. And it's in Bolsonaro in Brazil, it's Duterte in the Philippines, it's Orban in Hungary, and there are borderline cases in Sweden, in Italy, in Turkey, in India, and most of all, the poster boy of the global fascist revolution has been Donald Trump. And it's, I know fascist can be an epithet. I don't believe in name calling. Name calling is a bad thing, but naming is indispensable. And if you look at all the scholarly literature defining fascism, do you incite crowds to violence? Do you perpetually lie? Do you spread conspiracy theories? Do you attack embattled minorities? There's a list of a dozen or so traits, and he checks every box. And but Trump's just the pinup boy. Putin is the global strategist. He's been the real leader of it, and his animosity to democracy, he explained it plenty himself. One of the things we have to do, so it's worth fighting, but at the same time, to go to your question, right to the heart of the question about nuclear war, I don't believe the United States should be out arming anybody in any situation without at least having a plan for peace and a commitment to peace on the table. We need to have been talking not in an inflammatory way or in a personal way about Putin or anybody else. Although, again, we have to identify who he is, what he's doing, and why we need to stop it. But at the same time, we have to have an explanation of what the stakes are and what the end game is. I don't think Putin should be given a piece of territory, but at some point there ought to be real self-determination. That's one of the things we're fighting for here. And in some of those provinces, not immediately, not next year, even because the trauma has been so great. But at some point, there ought to be a UN supervised referendum in a couple of those places about where people want to be. You know, I feel the same way. If Scotland wants to leave England, if Staten Island wants to leave New York City, let them vote, let them do it. It's up to people how they want to live. Now that, you know, that's not what's happening here. We're fighting for the right to self-determination, but we have to put some of those things on the table. And we also have to make sure that as a country, we're not out trying to rig people's elections, and we're not out interfering in governments as we have throughout our modern history. And we paid a price every time. Whether it was toppling a democratically elected president in Iran 70 years ago that led to 2 generations of complete hostility and misery for that country, invading Iraq when there were no weapons of mass destruction, and we knew it. The list goes on and on. You know, Guatemala, where we knocked off the Arbenz regime just because United Fruit wanted the bananas. You know, you can. And we ought to do. I've said one thing, and just one of the changes you can make here is simply to take our foreign policy public. And in my lifetime, every time America does something, and in the 20th century, every time America does something out in the open, it ends up being something that makes me really proud as an American. The Alliance for Progress, the Marshall Plan, the Peace Corps, and our defense of many embattled countries where we were correct to be helping. And then whenever we do something in a clandestine way that the public doesn't know about till afterward, if ever, they tend to do things that don't make me proud at all. And they tend to do things that don't help this country at all. Iraq and Vietnam were both embarked on based on falsehoods. And if the Pentagon Papers had been public from the beginning, rather than 10 years after the war started, if all the decision making about Iraq had been in a public forum, I don't think we ever would have done either of those things. And what a different and better country we'd have today if we hadn't paid those prices. And so, as we go along, I understand this is a violent world, and it needs sometimes the application of force. But if we really want to be like a city on a hill, if we really want to show that there's something exceptional about us, then we can begin to lead the world toward what it dreams of. It's not there yet, but the dream is the renunciation of violence and the resolution of human conflict. That's the dream. And you at least have to begin to point in that direction. And so I wish we were having this discussion in a public way. The country, we'd just all be so much better off, and the world would be so grateful. And it would be one way of stepping back from that abyss that Stan is talking about, and where that Biden talked about. And I believe, I hope we're not right at the edge of it, but we're a lot closer to it than we'd ever want to be. And if we approach these things in the way I described, we wouldn't be.
Bill, one thing, you mentioned earlier off of the air that you feel inflation is something that we definitely need to keep. I guess people are paying attention because it's hitting you right in your face every single day. You try to make a purchase, you find the cost of whatever you're looking for going up and up. But sometimes when you hear arguments that your northeastern states or states like California is just too expensive, and then you get this impression that, well, Florida and Texas and Georgia, some of the right to work states, is so much less or cheaper. But doesn't inflation kind of neutralizes the whole country? That, if home sales or homes are going double than what they used to be 5 years ago, this is a national problem. You can no longer have this argument, well, I can just go to Texas and I'm gonna be able to do so much more because the cost of living is just so much less. I mean, where does inflation stand at towards the national problem that needs to be looked at and corrected very soon?
Huge. And I agree with everything you just said. And the problem is in how we're going about it. I believe that someday we will look back on the way we handled problems like inflation, the way economists talked about, thought about, and attempted to solve problems like inflation, the way we now look back on medieval surgery, bleeding people with leeches and hacking off limbs, and the price we're about to pay. The idea of the Federal Reserve coming in and simply raising interest rates, as it is doing at a pretty rapid clip, surprisingly to me. There's no doubt about what they're doing. It's publicly stated. They're trying to induce a recession or something close to it. They're trying to drive down wages. They're trying to drive up unemployment. The interest rates will drive up the cost of housing further. And part of this is in a kind of, I don't know, maybe neoliberal, but it's even longer standing than that. But we have this kind of macroeconomic theory that almost everybody on both sides at the top subscribes to. I think there's a great mistake, and this should be such a wonderful teaching moment right now. Why does food cost more? Because global warming has caused drought all over the world and driven up the price of food. It's also because we don't have enough agriculture workers because of our immigration policies right now, and the cost of labor in both the agriculture and restaurant sectors is going through the roof for those people, not because of wage inflation, not because Biden helped everybody during the COVID and wrote everybody a check. It's because there aren't enough workers, and it's because there isn't enough produce, and supply chains have been disrupted. Energy prices have gone through the roof because of the Ukraine war more than anything, and because we've done such a bad job fighting climate change and making the transition to a green economy. If it weren't for the Trump years, and if Obama and the Democrats had been more emphatic and committed, we could be so much further ahead on green energy right now that OPEC wouldn't have this power. And so inflation's a big problem, but it's not because there's too much money chasing too few goods, which is how the Nobel Prize winner as of this morning, Ben Bernanke, who was a good Fed chair, but even those guys would say it that way. Actually, right now, it's because there's too few goods. It's because the supply chain can't get working. We can't get the chips for the cars, and we're not growing enough food. All the harvests are down, and the cost of that labor is going up because we don't have enough people to do the jobs. And housing's the same way. If we just got back all the housing stock that we let rot in cities over the last 3 generations, we'd be at least 1 million units to the good. And by the way, those were beautiful buildings. So many of them that were let go. And if we didn't have all the resistance, whether it's zoning, permitting, financing, we don't need to raise interest rates to make rents and mortgages more expensive. Now, how does that fight inflation except through inflicting suffering? We need a couple million units of housing. We need to increase the supply. And until we get around to that, we're going to have some form of housing crisis no matter what we do. And so just stop it. So when you listen now to some economists on either side, but especially on the other side, on the more conservative side, tell you, oh, it's the deficit spending. We have inflation because Biden spent too much money. Really? Why does the rest of the world have a higher inflation rate than we do? You tell me Biden's responsible for the inflation in Germany and Korea and in England? The whole world is suffering inflation because of drought and climate change and supply disruptions and the Ukraine war. There are so many things we have to do, so much systemic change. This ought to be a moment to just stop and say, what's really happening? What's causing this? And it's not something out of that kind of economics textbook. And it's not something out of the abstract ideology of these elites. You can just look at it. Just anybody listen to them, just look around and think about why houses cost so much. Think about how many more houses we need. Think about what's happened to the energy prices. Look at the ravages of climate change. If we got off our butts and did something about those things, it would also take care of inflation.
Well, I think the housing crisis alone, I mean, if you really break everything down, where's people going to live? I mean, there's no getting around that. If you're going to be in the rental market, you have to live and pay higher rents. If you're going to be in ownership, you're going to have to live. We're not even really paying that much attention on our homeless population. I mean, it's skyrocketed. Now, there might be some other factors with the pandemic that contributed, with issues of mental health issues that we just wasn't able to stay on top of. But again, every time you listen to both parties, but particularly, let's just even say the Republican Party, they blame every social economic problem, particularly in our cities. They say, the Republican Party, that the Democrats, you've been in control of the city. You control most of the cities. Look where all of the crime is taking place at. You're at fault for having Chicago being what it is. You're at fault for New York. Is that a fair, valid criticism to say that the Democratic system, because they've been in control of the cities, they're the main reason and they're totally responsible for the high crime and the high social unrest that takes place into the cities? Or do you have to contribute many other factors that goes into why you have such a high crime problem in our cities throughout America that Democrats control?
Again, I just wish Democrats were better at making the most important arguments about critical issues like this, and they have to be affirmative about it. When I'm talking to progressives, I just said, no matter how progressive you are, if you're a candidate and you've knocked on doors, you know that there's 3 questions you have to answer from every voter, no matter how party they're registered in. 1, how much does that cost? 2, do you really know how to make that work? And 3, will you keep me safe? And if you can't answer those 3 questions, if you can't show frugality isn't a conservative ideological position, it's a virtue. Showing that we can, that we can change the rules, we can move the country forward. If they just are convinced that we're not picking their pockets, that we're really putting the money to good use, and that we're really being responsible, every poll in the world says they're for the things we want to achieve. And as far as public safety is concerned, Gavin Newsom's done the country a public service in the last few weeks by pointing out that 8 of the 10 states with the highest increases in crime have Republican governors. 8 out of 10. And although he didn't point this out, but I will now, there are vast swaths of rural America that have, Republican government at every level, where crime is rising faster than it is here. And I'll add one third thing. When I was with Bill Clinton, people remember the crime law that he did, which was very defective. But he did lots of things that worked. We used RICO statutes against drug gangs, and we broke them up. We put 100,000 cops in the streets for community policing. We created recreation programs. We had an economy that was more geared to help the disadvantaged and average people. What happened? Not only did crime come down more than it ever had since any statistics had ever been collected, but the crime that came down the most was the most violent crime, and it came down in the cities, the places that people thought were the most intractable. And so we were just helping people change the way they live, and we got a break from the economy itself. We didn't cause all that, just as I was saying earlier, but the economy helped. We tried to direct it in a responsible way. We put some programs. When I was a kid in Hartford, we had refs for show up at our afternoon basketball leagues. We got jerseys. When I was growing up as a little kid, no matter where I was, at playgrounds, at Mark Twain, or over up Blue Hills, there was always an adult there who knew who I was, who knew what I was supposed to be doing, and who knew me well enough to know what I was probably doing if I was doing something other than what I was supposed to be doing, and who cared. We owe every kid the same thing. And so there are some things, and there are some things we have to get tough about, and I'm all for it as long as it's responsible and effective. But there are a lot of other things. You be tough on crime, but be tough on its causes. And you put out a strategy like that. So again, when it's the same, you have global inflation from all the things I mentioned, and one side wants to say, oh, it's because Biden wrote those big stimulus checks. Yeah. And then we have crime, and they want to, it's just a version of blame the victim. and in some ways, the criminals themselves, they have to be held responsible. You got to make people safe, and a lot of that involves things that we think about in the most traditional ways when we talk about law and order. But there's a lot more to this. And when you explain it to people, they agree. Clinton became the first president in the history of polling to be trusted more than his Republican opponent on the issue of law and order. And it was because of the things I talked about and because they got results.
Later, I guess later in the month, I'm going to be covering a topic about Lynn Bias. And I guess when Lynn Bias, just want to ask you, get your opinions. Broke your heart, exactly. I mean, it was a very epidemic of cocaine and crack. But it seems like to me, when he passed away, and I had mentioned this to somebody else on the show as well, a lot of attention started going towards our drug policies, our laws that we have on the book, and Ronald Reagan and, former First Lady Nancy Reagan Just Say No theme and slogan came so popular. But when you're taking a problem of drugs in our country, and it seems like to me there's no indication that it's really being eradicated, you really can't blame just one party system for this problem. I mean, the drug problem seems like it's a much bigger problem. Poverty seems like it's a much bigger problem. I mean, Lyndon B. Johnson tried to declare war on poverty, and certainly there's been some failures. But every time you get into a political strategy, and I would say the Democrats will try to point fingers and blame too, but I just don't pick it up like the Republican Party. I don't know if because the Republican Party just wants to get in control of party and they want to prove to people that, the country has been ruined by Democratic policies. But when you have big problems like poverty and drugs, what type of political commitment do you think both parties needs to be doing to work together towards resolving this particular problem?
Okay, it's a huge question, and I don't want to pretend that I have anything like a whole answer to it. But I'll point back to the 90s, and one of the things that happened, and I don't want to say that it's racism, but race made people blind, helped make people blind to certain things, and so a lot of those policymakers, they raised the penalties on drugs in the cities that threw people into systems that weren't ever going to rehabilitate them, made them pay prices that weren't fair or right, and did nothing to really solve the problem. And the odd and sad thing is that while they were doing that, they just assumed it was something that didn't happen in small town America, where in fact all across rural America the seeds were being planted for the worst drug scourge of our history, which is still ongoing now, and it's opioids. And you have all the working rural, mostly white, but rural working class, and for the first time since this country was born, life expectancies are falling. Suicide rates, not for the first time, but most dramatically, are rising. Addiction rates are rising. People are dropping out. Young men, I tell people there is a crisis of young men in our country. There ought to be a take your sons to work day. We've got to talk to our sons and to young men and find ways to bring them back into the mainstream of our culture. There are all these people drifting off into the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and whatever other fantasy relieves their pain and stokes their fear and anger. We're losing a generation, and then some. And so a part of this just means stepping back and figuring out the real nature of the problem. And it turns out it's not an urban problem. It's not an urban problem exclusively. It's a universal problem. And we know some of the things that would work. We know that it's a mental health problem. The suicide rates and the opiate addiction rates, they're connected. And we know that substantially increased mental health services and counseling in schools could go a long ways. We also know that in that reduction in the crime rate and also in drug addiction rates in the 90s, people's lives just got better. They started earning more money. Opportunities started opening up. People wanted to go to college because they could see there really was a job at the end of that rainbow. And so we need to change these things now. And we need to look, again, tough on crime, sure, but tough on its causes, just as you would with any other problem you face. Not just what's right in front of me, but where did it come from? Where did it come from? And we need to do more of that.
Bill, before I ask you another question, maybe Stan, you might even want to ask him a question. I just want to get your opinion, Stan. This past week in Weaver High School in Hartford, they found some guns in a school. I don't know if it was 2 people that was charged with bringing guns into the school. Now, the first thing I had mentioned to someone is I thought at one point when Weaver High School had some issues in the past, they had installed metal detectors. Now, I don't think there was metal detectors in the school now. I don't know if that was because of the new construction design. And you don't want to start pointing fingers and blaming people, saying, well, how could you had metal detectors in the school and now you don't? But let's just say for the argument that Weaver High School had metal detectors. Do you still look at that as solving or preventing the problem of having guns coming into the school, or do you think some other factors we need to be looking at towards why would a kid try to bring a gun or bring a gun into your school system?
Well, I think more the latter. There's a reason why the young person brings a gun to school. Maybe they don't feel safe. It's a whole myriad of issues. So it isn't as simple as a metal detector.
Okay.
And if you have metal detectors, they rob banks. So, there's always a way around a metal detector. Always. So, if you're intent on getting something like that into the building, you probably will be successful. So the issue is less one of metal detectors and, what's going on in the culture, one, of the school, 2, in the orbit of the individual that brought the weapons into the school, and why. So, there's a huge issue that, has to be addressed up at Weaver High School.
Well, before I ask Bill this question, I want to ask you first. Now, a gun charge usually would be a felony charge. I don't know the age of the individual, so let's just say for sake he's under 18 years old of age, so he's technically a minor.
And I don't know that it was a male.
Okay, or a female, all right. It could be a male, or most likely it seems like it would be a male, but let's just say a student then, underage.
Right.
What do you do? Should you charge him as an adult and basically give him a felony and ruin his life, for a long time? Or do you try to work with him and as a student, let's say maybe he deserves, let's figure out what caused him to want to bring a gun.
Yeah, it seems to me the why is more important than trying to charge somebody. If obviously there's rules and laws, but what's the motivation behind this? This is, you have to. There's issues, and these issues. If someone doesn't feel safe,
right?
If someone was told they were going to be jumped on tomorrow, and you don't know where to turn or who to talk to, there's all kinds of issues. Bill talked about the mental health component and how that could be done at schools. There's been issues at Weaver since it reopened. There was a climate team that was put together to try and mitigate all these things before the school even opened. It was disbanded. So, it really needs a deep dive and some intentionality as to what's going on there before something really, really wrong happens. And you can't just, hit the crisis communication button and then hope it goes away in a week.
Right.
In the public sphere without addressing the problem, because it won't get better on its own.
Good answer, Stan. A good, accurate, honest answer too. Bill, you said you was born and raised in Hartford. You grew up in the capital city. I'm pretty sure in your generation, when you was going to high school, it was very unlikely that students would bring guns into schools. What's your take, if you have any, input on, when you hear kids bringing guns into school And how did we let this happen? How can we drop our guards and not realize that, I guess there's nothing you can do technically to prevent and solve anything 100%. But what's your views when you hear incidents like this of a kid bringing a gun into a school system?
Well, first of all, I think about the fact that we have the most guns per capita in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and that all of this, when we had an assault weapons ban in this country for only a decade, starting in the administration, the school shootings dropped. The first and most effective thing you could do is have real gun safety legislation enacted all across this country, and secondly, with that, that's the most important thing. But then also, there's an entire culture of violence that is encouraged in so many ways, from video games to television to movies to music. It's just we have to have we have to talk to one another about this, and begin to transmit a different message. Secondly, the kids in the schools that are most effective, they don't have as much help as kids get in Greenwich. I haven't seen if this is still the case, but when I looked last a while back, they had counseling sessions for kids to come to, and they had all kinds of support services to help young people evaluate the problems they were facing and the feelings they were having. And it's not just in cities where we didn't make that. You can go all across eastern Connecticut. It's not about black or white. It just there's been a resistance to it, and there haven't been the resources for it. But there are all kinds of ways in which we can help people, and before the crisis becomes full blown. And so I look at the culture, I look at the gun safety laws, I look at the support services to help people against. Stan talked about bullying, and bringing a gun to school is, of course, the worst way to deal with bullying, worst way possible. But it's the way people will use if they're not provided any other ways. And so we need to deal with all that. At the same time, there ought to be a penalty. No minor should be paying the same price that an adult pays for crimes like this. And the last thing you want to do is ruin a kid's life for possession of anything.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't let it go unresponded to either. They've got to be. You have to be ready to take the right actions to correct the situation that you find, including some of the things I talked about, and we just haven't, But there's a flood of guns. We're the worst in the world at it. We got to do something about it. It begins there.
Mm-hmm. Bill, I know you're probably not going to agree with one of my choices, but in Connecticut, it was mentioned that one of your two or three best governors in Connecticut was former Governor Ella Grasso, former Governor William O'Neill, and former Governor John Rowland. Do you agree with that assessment of those were probably your top three governors, or do you think there were some other governors that, I guess?
I hear that, people, and it's hard for me because I spent a fair amount of my adult life trying to get that job, and I failed at it, at doing so. And so my opinions of these people and what happens, and especially Rowland, whom I ran against twice, but Rowland was the worst governor.
He's the worst
of modern times in the state. First of all, the policies that when people always when people say, and he had so much potential, or he did so much other good, it's too bad he stole all that money. And I would just point out three things about it. One, that theory where you just bring cities back by building ballparks, or the stadium deal, and most of this, the only thing that really improved were the pocketbooks of his cronies. People made fortunes off these projects. It's not the way to bring cities back. It's through all the things that he laughed about: mass transportation, land use planning, property tax reform, making credit available to small business people in inner cities that can't get their hands on what they need to make a business work. All kinds of changes in schools, and as we've discussed, insurance reform, so people aren't paying umpteen times over the price for property and casualty insurance in central cities. There are things that we can do, that we have to do, none of which he was interested in. And of course, corruption he actually liked. More than 20 people went to jail. It was like the deck of the Titanic. And his complete contempt for ethics laws. He believed, like Trump believes, that ethics are for suckers. And without an improvement of that area, your democracy dies, and your economy eventually dies. Your whole economy turns into the Russian army, when there's so much corruption at the top. So he was the worst. Ella was a lot better than I thought. And Bill O'Neill had a good heart, and he had a real commitment to working people. He wasn't a great reformer either, in my view, but those aren't small things. And Ella was actually quite conservative. Ella was for the war and Vietnam War when she was a congresswoman. She had a lot of conservative aspects to her that I did not agree with then or now. Mm-hmm. But she was a reformer, and she gave us the Freedom of Information Commission, and she gave us a modernization of the DPUC. And she did the contract. She did the bidding reform. When Ella passed a massive bidding, enacted a massive bidding reform that said, you have to have competitive bidding for everything unless there's a real emergency. And by emergency, it meant, a real one. If the water was coming over the levee, you didn't have to put the sandbags out to bid. You could just go get them. And then Rowland came along and snuck in language to overrule that. So an emergency would be whatever it was. All you had to do was say it was emergency, and it was one. And he didn't even have to declare it. His department heads could. And the first thing they did was give his two biggest donors 3 no-bid contracts that ran $30 million over bid. And so he actually spent a lot of it. That's just one example of FOI, ethics laws. Ella gave us an ethics commission. Rowland totally trashed it, made a mockery of it. And so those are things we're still paying the price for. So no, it's not just because I ran against him, and it's been long enough. My life's moved on. But he was the worst governor. But he was the worst governor of our time, and she really was. Even though there were lots of things I wasn't crazy about at the time, as I've gone along, I've come to learn more and see that she was really, in many ways, an outstanding governor.
Well, Bill, let me get your opinion also. You mentioned Rowland, but some people give him credit for his welfare reform plan. I guess reducing your time that you can be on welfare for 21 months. Some people give him credit for how he handled crime. I think when the 7-year-old girl was killed in Charter Oak in Hartford, he stiffened up the policies. Like you said, you have to be tough on crime. So there was a lot of things about Rowland, obviously, that you think made him one of the worst governors. But how do you feel about his welfare reform policy and how he attacked crime during his administration?
The welfare policy is horrible.
I'm sorry.
Look, I was there when the welfare reform bill went through the Congress, and I wasn't a big fan of it. It was much better done at the federal level, and Rowland didn't do a lot about welfare except exploit it politically for people who felt aggrieved. But you have to just step back. The point is not just to get people out of welfare. The point is to get people off welfare and into the middle class. Mm-hmm. The point is and you do that with job training. You do that with childcare. It's one thing to put a limit on it, and for some people, limits are a perfectly appropriate answer. It, however, ignores the fact that so many people are there. Really, the idea that all people on welfare are there because they're lazy, when the vast majority of them in this state are actually sort of have mental illness and addiction problems. That's the number one group, and you have to do something about that. But you also have to do something about the overall economy. Just that, one of the promises that Democrats make and don't keep is to create a living wage. We started talking in 2008 about a living wage of $15, which by now would be closer to $20, and we're still not there. 30 states don't even have one. There are so many things that we need to do to open the doors of the middle class to everyone, and to make the middle class a more secure place than it has been. And so if you're not providing the child care, but we're finding it right now coming out of this pandemic, Women aren't going to work because they can't leave their kids. And the child care, the effect of child care on the working market is overwhelming. And so, you want to root out anybody who's freeloading. I want to get them. I have no interest in it. But the degree to which people have made that their interpretation of the problem, while overlooking all these other things that are staring us right in the face, all the help that people need. When I was running, I thought that we should make sure that every central city had childcare, as much of it as possible, located at schools, and also that we had healthcare clinics in schools so that make sure the kids, even if they had personal insurance or government Medicaid, they weren't getting the healthcare because they weren't getting the providers. Bring the providers to where the children are. Make sure they get healthy. There are so many things we can do to help people, not just off of welfare, but into the broad American middle class that was always one of the, along with democracy, a centerpiece of the American dream.
Mm-hmm. Bill, we're out of time for this particular segment, and it was very informative and interesting to listen to the things that you had mentioned this morning, and I really appreciate you being available and somewhat under short notice for this particular segment.
My pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure.
Anytime I can bail you out, Jonathan, I'd be happy to lend a hand.
Exactly. Well, obviously, it's political season. You're a political expert, so I wanted to most likely I would have waited to after the election. I wanted to bring a political expert on, but obviously the timing was definitely a need, and I had to have someone available. And let me just say, Jonathan, if it turns out that every prediction I made turns out wrong, don't have me on for at least a couple of months. Okay, let it all blow over. Well, one thing you mentioned that you predict somewhat that Ned Lamont will be reelected governor of Connecticut. It sounds like you don't see Bob Stefanowski unless something dramatic out of the ordinary happens within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And
that means Eric Russell, Sean Scanlon, Stephanie, all these people are going to be. I think the ticket's going to win. Across the board. I think Blumenthal will be okay. Johanna Hayes, if Democrats want to give somebody a little extra help, that's the one district I feel a little bit shaky about. If somebody's got an extra $10 to throw at somebody or a few hours to volunteer, what a terrible thing it would be if we lost the U.S. House because we lost a seat here. And again, I'm not predicting that, but it's close enough that people should give help where they can.
Well, I can't see Congressman John Larson or Speaker Matt Riddle losing. Stan, you'd have to go with that. You don't see those two losing.
No.
It's hard to picture that. So I think Connecticut stands in good shape.
My high school buddy Joey Courtney is going to be okay, I think. But again, you don't want to jinx anybody.
That's true. You don't want to jinx now. You remember what happened with Hillary Clinton? She thought she had the election in the bag in 2016, and then you saw what happened. So you don't want to. It was 2016, obviously, when she ran against Donald Trump.
When people, I'll just say one last thing, but I was on the radio the other day talking with my friend Colin McEnroe about a show he was doing about why people don't care about politics and can't get interested. And I just when people tell me they're not voting, I'm just stupefied. And partly they just don't know what they're missing. And election day. On that one day, we are the government, and all the politicians and lobbyists tremble on waiting our judgment. This is the day. Nothing stands between us and our own right to self-government, all of us. And for all the things we talked about just this morning that are wrong with politics, if we all just showed up, I swear to God, in my heart, I believe that would cure it.
Very encouraging words to end this particular segment on. And I wish you the best of luck, whatever your plans are in the very near future. And look forward to talking to you again as well.
All right. You guys behave. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's good to see you again.
Take care, Stan. Same here.
All right, Bill Curry.
Bill Curry. It's been a while since he's been on the network, but he's one of the best political analysts in Connecticut. And definitely, he brings a lot of informative information. It sounds like both of y'all kind of in agreement on many different areas, too.
It does indeed. Yeah. Well, let's take a short break. We'll be back. We'll go visit Jay Hogarth and take a little music break. Morning talk. Stick and stay. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
14. This is 15. Da-dee-da. Yeah, that's what that is. That's 15.
Okay, and the quarter notes 1, 2, 3. You'll count it
You
twice
could,
as
yeah,
fast.
you could play this. You could play these two
In there, yeah.
as one, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Sure.
If you want to 1,
Yeah.
2, instead of playing these. You're on. So you're on. What I want the jiggle it. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone should be out by now. Everyone should be out. It's like 2 bars, like in like rubato time, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, out, and yeah. Here we go. Disposable consumption. Take 2. You got it, James.
Jay Hogarth. Oh yeah. Recording session with Jay Hogarth down in New York City. That was a lot of fun. Bill Curry was our guest this morning. Great interview. Good topics.
Yeah, it was very nice. That was very nice.
Is that what you're saying, or did somebody wrote that as a comment?
No.
Oh,
I'm
saying
saying that. I'm saying that.
Well, Bill is obviously an expert. I mean, he's a political expert, but he seems like he has other knowledge beyond even politics that he was mentioning earlier about the environment, other issues towards, well, I guess the nuclear incident or the nuclear issue that you asked him, you can say that's politics.
You're working on policy, too.
Policies, yes. But knows a lot about other areas, even outside of politics. But obviously, with him being a political expert and the political season and just what you're hearing about Connecticut. I mean, I sent you a link yesterday of the interview with Bob Stefanowski on Real Stories. He's an excellent speaker. I mean, he's like he knows how to articulate himself and he knows a lot of the issues. But again, the bigger picture is, okay, the Democratic candidate or the Democratic governor is done wrong. He's not handling the state the way you feel it needs to be handled. But why him? And he feels he has some type of platform that he could manage Connecticut better than Governor Ned Lamont. I guess that's what it is.
Do you feel he has a plan? Do you feel that his vision is better than the current guy's vision?
I don't see it better for your working class or your poor people. Now, again, I'm not hearing that much about his platform. What can he do?
Well, you're a voter. You're a constituent. So that's why I ask you, what, based upon where you are right now, what you've heard from the governor, and do you believe that he has a vision? And he's not the only one running for governor, by the way.
Yeah, but he's obviously the big ticket item. I mean, I know that your Great American African Alliance, you had the candidate.
We had one of the candidates on, but there'll be others. We're gonna have on like 3 candidates every Saturday to November the 5th.
But you're not gonna have the governor, and you're not gonna have.
As of right now, they're not signed up. There's still some slots left, but there's only 5 left. Out of 15, either 15 or 18 slots. There's only like 5 left.
Well, I mean, I got to stay neutral and say, not bring in the fact. Well, neither.
Well, I'm not asking you to endorse anybody.
Right.
Pointing something out isn't talking about it. It's just pointing it out. So, I mean, based on, as a constituent, you say, well, you haven't really heard. That means that other people haven't really heard. So that would mean,
I mean, he mentioned something about a tax cut strategy that he would like to implement. But I don't know if taxes, I mean, they say taxes now. I think the biggest issue for taxes is when you get into businesses. I think, higher taxes is a problem, having more money taken out of your income. But I think the economy and just people feeling safe in Connecticut, and then feeling like, the economy has some issues. It's hard to believe you have issues when there's a job shortage of workers, but they are saying that Connecticut economy could be, and the U.S. economy could be headed towards a recession. So
our guest talked about that this morning in saying that, there seems to be a willful intent in the on the avenues of those who are the great thinkers and doers to bring about a recession.
Yes, initially make the U.S.
So
economy.
there are policy makers and folks who execute policy who believe that that's the best option. Our guest disagreed with that and laid that out. But I think.
Well, I was really looking to get a guest to talk about home ownership rate, and then I spoke to someone who is scheduled to be on in November, and the person has a much broader view on just not just home ownership, but actually wealth management. A lot of things that I think is going to be real informative that people needs to hear about and know about. How to increase your wealth, other investment opportunities beyond just owning a home. Why are people paying so much money in debt and student loans? I mean, it's going to be a much broader show. This was just going to be, if I had the guest scheduled I was looking to have on this today, it would have just been about home ownership issues and disparities and the races of home ownership. But talking to the guest for November, it's going to be much broader than that. And covers many different areas. Like I say, student loans is a major issue that people are finding themselves in debt with. There's ways to really get a good education without running yourself into student debts, from what the guest or the person was telling me.
That's very true.
I guess expand your horizons. I mean, everybody could be locked into just going into schooling one way, trying to get into a college or university or even some type of expensive technical school. And there's other ways that you could get educated and trained without having to run into that type of debt.
I guess it depends on the type of education you're seeking. It'd be hard to stay out of debt going to medical school unless you
I was just going to say that, actually. What you choose, like a doctor, you would have to obviously.
Right, some things are going to cost you money relative to how much money you make, but you still can manage that. You can manage that better.
Yeah, manage it better. And, obviously, if you have a fulfillment or desire to want to become something that requires a college education, then, you can't allow anyone to say that's not the path that you need to go down. But it's still also letting you know other alternatives that's out there, because many times, I mean, I will say, Stan, and I guess in your take, it's not, I'm actually wrong when I say part of the problem that people might find themselves having them running into is that they don't know really what's out there beyond what they know or what they think they know. And you stated that you can't know everything. I agree with that, Stan. You're not going to know everything about what's available and what's this and that. It's a learning process. But at some point, the right information still needs to be out there in the atmosphere. And then people have to do their part, being serious and seeking it and being committed to. But I think using this platform of social media is I guess it's less expensive than even television. I mean, you're putting together a media coverage of a interview that if you did this through a television format, it would be much more expensive. So you found the platform that we have.
Well, that's a good subject, man. I mean, that's a good that's an interesting point that you bring up when you say less expensive. Yes and no. If you're on television, you're going to reach a certain number of people by default.
Okay.
If you're on social media, you're going to reach a targeted number of people.
Okay.
So while it may cost you nothing to be on social media, let's say you're selling something that costs $100, and you're making people aware of it on social media, and you reach 100 people, very targeted. But those 100 people aren't interested in what you're selling. They know about it, but they're not in the market to buy what you're selling. You're on, and it didn't cost you anything to get that message out. Now, other than time, energy, and effort, but it didn't cost you like money out of pocket. But if you're on television, let's say a WFSB, a WVIT, or something like that, WTNH, and you're on, you reach 30,000 people, 50,000 people, right. 1 million people. Out of that million, you're more likely to get people who want to buy your product.
All right.
If you turn that into message, more people hear your message on television because it just has a bigger audience.
Well, even yesterday's segment of Real Stories was broadcast on Fox 61. They was able to upload it on the internet, where you can watch it on social media as well as television. You know? So they got both areas covered.
Absolutely.
And now to do a social media television vision format and try to put it on television, it's still going to cost you some money, right?
Getting on television is not as easy because television there's a very limited number of hours. There's only 24 hours in a day.
Right.
And there's only one television channel. So Fox 61, while there are other channels, there's, because of the way the digital spectrum works, but their basic channel would be Fox 61. There's only 24 hours. And that means if people were to have a 1 hour time slot on that, there would only be 24 people that could broadcast. That's it.
That's it, yeah.
24. So you can't just roll up into Fox 61 and get time. I don't care how much money you have. All of the time is not available to you. Only a certain amount of time. I bought time on channel 20, I think, or on PAX television many years ago for a movie project that we did on Easter Sunday. Okay, so we were able to get time on Easter Sunday morning to show our movie. It was less expensive than the premiere. So we premiered it on television because our desire was to have as many people see it as possible, as opposed to just a little private audience. Because after the private audience, we had no way of really getting it out. So it's a matter of what it is you want to do. So television is the grand poobah of messaging. So if you're a political candidate and you want to get your message out, you have to have money to get on television.
Right.
If you don't have money to get on television, no one's going to really, for all practical purposes, no one's going to hear your message.
Now, again, when you ran for mayor, I didn't recall seeing you on Channel 3 and 30 and 61 like I saw Mayor Brown, and that was all about money. You
talk about TV commercials?
TV commercials.
No, I didn't have money to put them on.
That's what I mean. It's very expensive to run.
Very expensive, exactly. And you can't just put one commercial on. It's a campaign, so it requires presence because everyone's not watching when the commercial came on. If they weren't watching when it came on, they won't see it. So you have to have your commercial has to come on in particular slots where there's likely to be people. The news draws a local audience. High profile projects or programs like sports shows, morning news like Good Morning and those kinds of programs. Those things have large audiences. So if you have a large audience, you want to buy time in that, and then that costs more.
Yeah.
And you could burn through $100,000 in no time. Just blow it right out. And that's just in 30-second spots.
Right.
60-second spots. Very expensive.
But again, that's where I'm saying getting your message out. I mean, I know that's a different area now. That's running a campaign. You're trying to get elected, so the voters have to know who you are and they have to see you. You have to be able to present yourself. So when I'm saying about knowing what's available out there, you can't always, like you say, translate that into every problem that a person may be having. I mean, certainly you would like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Even this student, who had brought a gun into the school, you just can't say, well, the kid didn't know it was right or wrong. Obviously, he knows bringing a gun into a school is wrong. So that's we got to
the right and wrong of it. I think is well understood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you get into why he brought it into school.
Right.
People may not I don't even know why you don't know why he brought the gun into school. You don't have no idea. So I always say I like to know why something. I mean, I think that's people say it's not important.
It's legitimate for anyone to want to know why. If anybody, to me, the desire to know is reasonable and really doesn't need any explanation. You want to know.
Well, I think you said it before, knowing why that could lead towards resolving the situation is different than knowing why just to know why. If there's a problem of kids possibly bringing guns into your school system, then yes, knowing why would be helpful, I would assume.
I'm sure they will find out why.
Right.
If they don't already know why. You may not know why.
Right.
I may not know why. But us knowing just feeds our area of curiosity.
Right. And I think we also got to be careful. I mean, you mentioned some issues about Weaver High School I happen to graduate from too. So it's a little sentimental in some ways of knowing why something and painting this picture that Weaver High School now is a troubled school. I mean, there's some issues or some problems that's in Weaver that I'm sure I'm not aware of. But sometimes one incident like this can paint a whole picture that that's a bad school. You don't want nothing to do with that school. And that may not be a fair.
Well, I don't know anyone's painting Weaver as a bad school. It is what it is. And in reality, people walk away with preconceived notions, whether they're fair or not. And you have no control over that. So it might be nice to hope people don't think that way, but people are going to come to conclusions on their own. To that degree, the why becomes relevant so that people have an understanding and can then don't need to make assumptions. Because if people want to know something and they don't, they will assume. Most assumptions are wrong. But where people don't have information, they have to fill that gap with something. And a lot of people will assume, well, see, we were just a bad school. That that's not necessarily the truth. But since they don't know, that's what they will leave with. Others will assume that this was an isolated incident. That may not be true.
That might not be. I'm glad you said that.
But see, we don't know.
Okay.
But to the degree that we need to know, it's only so that we'll have some sense of whatever. It's not like your knowing is going to make a difference. Now, if your knowing makes a difference, then you need to know. Like if you're going to go down there and volunteer, you're going to be a citizen that volunteers at Weaver every day, that just does something, contributing. That would be different. But most people that want to know, it's just another piece of information for them.
Well, now keep in mind now the metal detectors that was installed in Weaver High School was installed before Sandy Hook incident took place. So there were some serious problems. You just don't install metal detectors into a school system unless you really have some strong areas of people having issues or not feeling safe or troublesome problems. So there was something that really, I don't think they just installed metal detectors in Weaver High School just for the sake of it.
I don't know.
Well, there were some incidents that took place that led up to that.
This was years and years and years ago.
Right.
There might have been trouble. Now, you went to Weaver, so you remember what was going on here in Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe people were bringing knives or something like that into the building, and they wanted metal detectors. A lot of times, things aren't bad, but there are elements who create a condition of perception that things are bad, and the perceived. How people perceive things is relative to what they will allow to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, or maybe there is an element within the school that felt unsafe, and rather than to deal with the problem, they did a Band-Aid.
Right.
So it without real information, it's hard to come to an informed understanding based upon the facts if you don't know what they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. One of your co-hosts, Luis Delgado, I don't think he went to Weaver. He sounds like he's a little older than me, so he might have came along he might have went to high school during the 70s. And older people told me during the 70s, Weaver not only had a bad reputation, there was some serious problems that was going on in Weaver High School. And they kind of got eliminated when I went into Weaver during the 80s to some degree. Students were being stabbed, assaulted in school.
So you could see why perhaps people might have a bad. I mean, you don't. You said, well, we don't want to paint the picture. Well, I mean, people make assumptions. So if the last thing they heard was something bad, they'll assume things are just as bad and haven't gotten better, or they've gotten worse. So with the whole assumption thing.
Well, there was even some doubts, man. People was telling me, don't go to Weaver, it was just a bad school. We're talking the 80s now, but still people were saying, you might want to be careful about going to Weaver. Then some people said, no, don't listen to them, man. It's not that bad. Some people that had just graduated from Weaver said,
matter of perspective.
Perspectives.
If you are afraid of the dark, you're going to tell everyone you know to stay home at night because it's dangerous out. If you can't wait until nighttime comes, because that's when the party happens, you're going to invite everyone you know to come over to the house at night. And so it's a lot of these things are relative. Now, there is a very real culture in the school. Whether that culture is good or bad, someone can let us know. But every place has a culture. There's a culture in City Hall. There's a culture in the police department. There's a culture at St. Francis Hospital versus the culture in St. Francis Hospital is different than the one at Hartford Hospital. So every place has its own culture, and the culture within that school can be toxic, or it can be one that lends itself to an atmosphere of everyone is very collegiate. People are helpful. There's a desire to learn, a school spirit. We don't know what that is. But something happened where the young person felt they needed to protect themselves, or they needed to bring guns into the building during school. Now that's a problem.
Right.
And that speaks to something.
And I don't put this in the category of what took place in Sandy Hook. I think that was a complete
totally different
story. The person killed his mother. He shot up people trying to enter the school. This sounds like, on the surface, an incident where someone felt it was in their best interest to bring a gun into the school.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm picking up on.
Whether they were selling the gun, taking possession of the gun, or protecting themselves, who knows? Someone knows. I don't.
But, you said something important, Stan, is that kids need to just have the right atmosphere, and your issues that you should be dealing with in school is ready to learn.
Absolutely.
You shouldn't be having to worry about someone assaulting you or even seeing assaults. I mean, school is not. I guess you remember the movie Lean on Me.
That was with Joe
Clark.
Yeah.
Well, that was how people painted Weaver during the 70s. Maybe not quite as a principal with a bat, but the type of things that was going on at that school in Paterson, New Jersey, the older people was telling me that's what was taking place in Weaver during the 70s.
Well, the Lean on Me story is a true story.
Right.
And so with the right culture in the school, the whole school changes. All it requires is leadership. And that may seem like an oversimplification, but it isn't. The right leader makes a difference. Just like the right coach makes all the difference with the same players. At the end of the day, to whom much is given, much is required. And these are ultimately leadership issues.
Well, it's not a fair thing to really put the ball on your court, because you had a 17-year-old student one time that was doing summer intern here. He seemed like a well-mannered student.
Well, all of the interns that I've ever had have been well-mannered.
Right. But you know where I'm getting
I don't know if it's because of me. I think that the people who came here just happened to be well-mannered.
Right. But I just kind of was wondering, I don't think it's a fair thing to really say, but I'll say it anyway. If a student like this student or some troublesome student came into let's say the school system sets up a type of summer intern program again, that you have to be responsible for giving a kid maybe an hour or two a day some learning, and this kid now comes into your home and he wants to spend all of the time on the phone. He wants to be smoking blunts.
It's
not going to be tolerated. So
right.
You don't allow that to even get to that point. And, he may just say, F you, man, I ain't going to deal with you. You can't tell me what to do. Because people say there are students like that have that type of subculture mentality there
are actually gifted people within the schools who can interface and deal with young people that exhibit and display that attitude. They're not unreachable. First and foremost, they're children. I think people forget that they're children.
I would say
they're kids.
I would say they're children in the sense of, yeah, you're right.
They're kids. They're children.
But some of them are doing some things that adults would be doing.
They may be doing things that quote unquote adults would be doing, but they're still children. They're vulnerable. They're afraid. They don't want to be embarrassed. There are people within the school system whose profession it is to deal with children. They're developed child development experts. They know the phases that kids go through. So these things are not things that are unknown to people in the school system.
Right.
So the question is, are those individuals, do they have access to do the young people have access to the type of adult leadership they need within the schools? And
well, I will tell you, when I was going to school, and I guess they still have it today, you had to have hall monitors in your high school, because probably once a week you would have some type of fight or disruption. And I don't think you put that burden on the teachers. Now, again, dating myself, in elementary school, Miss Birdie Cody, they disciplined us. It was not, you get into any trouble, they would either send us up to the principal, or Miss Cody had some other type of, she really wasn't a teacher, but she kind of worked with the school system, and you got spanked. And we never thought about calling DCF or anything, calling our parents. It wasn't abuse. Now, I don't want to give you the picture that it was abuse.
Well, they don't spank young people anymore.
They don't. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, But I'm just saying, when we went to school, if we did something,
When I went to school, I actually got spanked for messing around in industrial arts class.
right,
Wood shop.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So
I only got spanked 3 times as a child, and 1 time in school.
at school, yeah.
So I forget about that as being one of the times I got spanked because it wasn't at home kind of thing. But yeah, I was in the 8th grade.
Oh, okay, that's junior high school, yeah.
I was in the 8th grade.
8th grade, yeah. Yeah, they didn't do that in junior high when I was going to school, no.
Oh yeah, 8th grade. And the shop teacher, every single teacher had a paddle in their room.
Mm-hmm.
It was hanging on the wall.
Right.
Penridge school system in Percy, Pennsylvania, and it was a public school system. And yes, yeah, they had paddles. It was hanging on the wall, and if you misbehaved, you was dealt with, and then you went right on about the business. It wasn't no big thing. You knew that if you acted out of sorts, there was going to be a consequence that was immediate, and it was no one abused.
Right.
It was more a check on your behavior to get it together, mister or ma'am.
Well, that's how it was,
And you stopped being a clown. The whole class came to attention, and folk got right back in line and and did what they were there to do: study.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you behaved in class. We had peer counselors, because I was one. We had peer counselors. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of ironic because, how people discipline kids in school then. I mean, I can't picture today. You say it happened to you when you was in 8th grade, so you're 13, maybe 14. There are kids, actually, believe it or not, in the 8th grade that's 16 years old. That's another problem.
My daughter 7 is in 8th grade. Yes. 7 is in the 8th grade, and she's 13 today. Today's her birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, 7.
Yeah, so she's 13. Yeah, so 13.
Yeah, you can be 13 in the 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, let me see. When I was in the 8th grade, how old was I?
If you started early.
You started early,
you could be 12.
12, right.
Right. She was 12, obviously, but she's turning 13 now. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'd say anywhere from 12 to 14.
Yeah, I was 13 when I started the 8th grade, and I turned 14 during the 8th grade year. I mean, during the 84, 85 year. So I was 13 going into the school year, then I turned 14.
That's about right.
And some people couldn't even believe that, man, because we had students there 15 years old that was in the 8th grade. They thought that was
must have fell behind one.
Fell behind, yeah, to do that. Year. But the disciplinary, I mean, we had issues back then. I don't think this is nothing new. I know someone that retired from DCF, and him and his wife, I guess they still take troublesome children into their home, and it's part of DCF or whatever. He's retired from DCF, but he still works with kids in the DCF system. And he said one of the students tried to tear up his wall. So you got some kids doing some things that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, it's
absolutely, but that doesn't mean that they can't be reached. Right. Troublesome children are just that. Troublesome children.
Important that you deal with it now before it gets to a troublesome adult. If you can. I mean, I don't know.
If you can, yeah. But young people can be reached. They're young. They're kids.
But
that's what they're going through. They're growing up and becoming adults, and so they're not, dangerous or a threat in a general sense, But if you don't have the right people, then it won't be held.
But the argument, I mean, I got to be honest, Stan, it was a violent week in the capital city since I was here last week. There was a homicide that took place of a young person. They claim it was more likely a drug transaction. There was the carjacking incident. I think the person that tried to carjack someone in the Parkville section of the city, he ended up being killed. Mm-hmm. Somebody else was critically shot. That's a threat to public safety, someone trying to steal your car through gunpoint in the daytime.
A lot of threats to public safety. Yeah, but go on. Mm-hmm.
And then another incident, a baby was found in a car, stolen at the Dunn's River restaurant. I guess the lady or the mother left her child inside the car.
With somebody. The person that she left the car with took the car.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't that she left the baby in the car.
He took the car.
And someone got in it and ran off. The person who was in the car with her drove off with the baby.
Oh, okay. So I'm glad you clarified that.
Right,
I was not aware of that. So that's kind of like someone she knew.
Would seem.
So that's not like someone breaking into your car.
Right.
Okay. I'm glad you clarified that. Well, I looked at a segment yesterday. I guess the reporter for WFSB, Eric Parker, he has a Sunday morning show. Mm-hmm. And Chief Political Analyst Susan Raff, yeah, she was on the show. She said one thing, though. She said Hartford is on pace to have, I guess, a record number of homicides, and could have 20, something like 20 more before. That's hard to believe, though.
20 more before the end of the year would be outrageous. But that I don't.
Oh no. She didn't say that. She said it was on pace for a 20-year high. So the last time it's been this high was 20.
Well, it's 30 if it doesn't turn to 31 because of somebody that was shot. I think yesterday or Saturday.
Right.
They're in critical
Saturday,
but stable condition.
Right. The key thing is, Stan, you and I, we feel safe in the city overall. Mm-hmm. Some people don't. Mm-hmm. Some people see Hartford as a dangerous, and our other urban cities as a dangerous, reckless city out of control. I see it as a city that got some serious problems, but it's not out of control. It's not Chicago. But it has some serious problems that is making, I can see why people might feel the perception that they have of the city. But I don't still sense the city is a war zone. I don't have that type of image.
Oh, it's not a war zone unless you happen to be near where folk are being shot at. Mm-hmm. Now that doesn't come. The number of people who have expired is 30. There's been 30 homicides. Mm-hmm. The number of people who've been shot is well above 100.
Well above 100, right?
So those individuals, had the person shooting at them had better aim,
that's homicide. Yeah.
Those people would all be dead.
So that's a very alarming reality now that you just mentioned.
The potential of having 130 people dead is there.
It's there, yes.
But for the fact that the people don't shoot well, they're alive.
Because most time if somebody's shooting at you, they're not just trying to shoot at you just to hurt you, like shoot you in the foot.
They could be running while they shoot. They're not shooting well, know. But nonetheless, number of people shot is well above 100. But there's been 30 homicides so far. There probably will wind up being 35.
Mm-hmm. Oh, easy.
At the rate we're going,
yeah,
30,
at the rate
I'd
things
say
are
35.
going, yes. I mean, I could see it's just it's October, and you have a couple of months left in the year. But I didn't even get a chance to address the bill earlier, but the rankings now, Hartford ranks last in home ownership rate in the state. They're having some, I guess, initiative or some type of program to try to increase home ownership rate. Homicides, we rank, I guess, first. We have the most homicides out of any city in Connecticut. I don't know about the other areas of our high school dropout rate. I would assume we're at the bottom. I don't know if we're dead last or not. But
it's a poor city in the grips of poverty.
And that always translates into
the issues that you're talking about are associated with poverty, and so, you know.
But you know what thing? People have said this, and it's not wrong what they said, but it's not telling the whole picture. People will say Hartford is not a poor city. The people in the city is poor. That there's money that comes into Hartford. The greater Hartford region, if you combine the surrounding towns, I think we're one of the 8th richest in the country. But even separating that factor, people will say money comes into the city. It's just not getting to the people that live in the city.
Well, it's not meant to come to the people that live in the city.
Right.
You know, that I guess people say that, but they're not mutually exclusive. Just because money comes into the city doesn't mean somehow that money is supposed to go to people who don't have any money. The money goes for paying for streets, snow removal, salt, paper for the city, paying employees, paying health care for employees. That costs money to run the city. So that's where the city's budget is. If the money is not coming into the city for the poor,
right,
or the rich.
And it's one other thing
it's not like money that's just sitting downtown waiting for people to come and get. So that's a misnomer. Money comes into the city for corporations too.
Well,
all kinds of money comes into the city. Well,
you left out one other fact, or at least I left it out.
What is that?
People come into the city and make money, but they go out of the city, so they don't live in the city.
Well, what about the people that live in Hartford that don't work in Hartford?
They don't make any money in the city, right?
But they make money somewhere. They make money in East Hartford, or make money in Glastonbury, or make money in New Haven, or make money in New York, and then they come back here with New York's money.
But that's not translating into wealth, though. If people in Hartford is going outside of Hartford, and I don't work in Hartford at the airport, is outside of Hartford,
right?
But I'm not rich. But I'm saying people. It seems like to me, what your affluent towns come into Hartford, make a lot of money, and then they take the money in a tax base out.
But Jonathan, people say that's a misnomer. People go to work and they are compensated for their work.
Right.
Now, if they have a job that pays them a lot of money, that makes them quote unquote rich.
Right.
I don't know how many people are getting rich from working in municipal government of Hartford.
Right.
I don't know how many people are being rich by working at United Technologies in Hartford. Or at the Hartford. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people at the Hartford who, may be making,
well,
$200,000, $250,000. But most people working at the Hartford aren't making $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
They're making an average wage. So if they were, quote unquote, I had to hit the emergency sneeze button. I couldn't switch the camera off. I had to choose either the camera or the sound. I'm sure there's now. If these people were as rich as you're making them out to be, they wouldn't be going to work.
Well, when I say rich, maybe that's not the best definition of what I should have said. You're making enough money to be comfortable. If you today, believe it or not, if you're looking to own or rent a nice, decent place to live, you have to be making a certain amount. You can't be poor anymore, I don't think, and you can afford to live in your Windsor, Bloomfield. You have to be making a certain amount.
Right. You could live in Windsor or Bloomfield, but you'd be living in the areas of Windsor and Bloomfield where people who don't make a lot of money live.
Right.
So you cannot make little bit of money and live where the wealthy live.
Yeah.
Because you don't make enough money.
Well,
so if people want to want a luxurious lifestyle, then they have to make luxurious lifestyle money.
I've come to that realization, but what inflation has done, even over the past 5 years. I mean, if your home's cost now is doubled, and your wages are about the same as it was. I mean, that's another problem too within itself. Why is a home that ordinarily would be going for one price going for double the price? I guess that's inflation.
Well, you could say that that's inflation, but I would say while inflation may have a hand in that, the demand for the home is what's driving it.
That's true.
So if you have a house that 20 people want,
right,
you don't give it to the person who wants to give you the least amount of money.
Right.
I only have $50,000. I know this is a $500,000 house, but won't you look kindly upon me?
Right.
And the other guy is saying, well, it's a $500,000 house. Right now I could command $1 million, and I got 3 people willing to pay me.
Right. The inventory is low on homes too. That's another
inventory is low. Demand is high. So the seller can. It's a seller's market.
Seller's market.
Seller can command a big price. Now, sometimes it's the other way around. The demand is not there. The seller can't get rid of the house.
Right.
It's on the market 2, 3, 4 years. They can't get rid of the house. Sometimes people just abandon the house. Let it go into foreclosure. You see what I'm saying? So, market changes these things. But irrespective of that, people coming into a particular city to work, whether it's in the private sector or government, they're just going to work. They're not taking the city's money out and giving it to another city. They work for the money they were paid, and then they can go and spend their money wherever they want, and they can live wherever they want as long as they can afford it.
Right. Right.
That's just life. And there's, if you don't make a lot and you want what folk that make a lot have, that's not inequity. That's you need to make more money. Once upon a time, I can remember people working 2 jobs. I remember people going to work and then working part-time. I remember a time when that was normal. People worked part-time. I remember when moms stayed home and dads worked full-time and part-time to make ends meet, to buy a new car, to do something like that. People lived basically within their means.
Yeah.
You moved to a less expensive apartment because you couldn't afford the one you were in. People don't want to do those things now. They want everyone else to make the sacrifices for their comfort instead of them making the sacrifice for their comfort.
Right.
And that's not to say that inflation isn't here, but inflation hits everyone.
Yeah,
hits everybody.
But the only difference with inflation hitting everyone, if you have more assets, it's still, you still don't want to pay more. Now you go into a grocery store 1 week and now bread is over $5. You would like for bread and eggs to be less.
A millionaire wants to save money just as much as the guy that's making $3 an hour. Slave wages.
Right.
Because money means a lot to him.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to spend extra dollars on anything. So inflation hits everybody, and his appetite is not on a $3 budget. So if he's going to go get a Lamborghini for his cousin, he might think twice because the price of Lamborghinis just went up. This is ridiculous. The country club might not be something that they're going to sign up for another year. Inflation hits everybody. Because someone makes a lot of money or has a lot of wealth doesn't mean that they don't have issues. They don't have family issues, trials and tribulations. A lot of the people that are seemingly the most jacked up publicly are folk who make lots of money, can be very famous. That doesn't mean they don't have family issues, trials and tribulations. Divorce takes half of their money.
Yeah.
They have a very expensive taste, entourages, security that they have to pay for. It's not like because they are quote unquote rich, they don't have any issues. Everyone has issues.
Well, again, when I said rich, I had used the wrong definition of rich. I mean, I was not even thinking about 200,000 that you just mentioned. I mean, but I would say that's upper middle class if you want to technically come down to it. but make enough, at least be in a position that you can make enough that you can keep up with the cost of living. And then you do have to make adjustments. You know, you don't always have to take a vacation, and people are still traveling. You know, it's amazing. People talk about they got so much problems in debt. You just took a cruise, you just dropped $10,000 and you're wondering why you have to build up your credit or you have to work. Well, you just took an expensive vacation
that you could not afford.
But you want to have a good time.
So you had a 1 week good time and now you're broke.
You're broke. So
and in super debt. People have to live within their means. That's what when I say people have to live within their means, that's what I'm talking. That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
It would be nice to be able to go see Hamilton, but the tickets is $300 each. You want to pay for 4 people to go see a play?
A play, yeah.
At $1,200, or you know that doesn't make any sense. But people will do that to put on the credit card, and the credit card gets maxed out. You know, maybe you have to drive 1 car. You don't need 2 cars in a family. There are people who have families of 4. The kids are 18, living at home. Other kid is 19. Mom and dad, and there's 4 cars in the driveway.
Yeah.
The amount of money going out of the household with 4 brand new cars sitting in the driveway it makes no sense. They're addicted to consumption, in my opinion.
Right.
So if you want some money, get a used car that's paid for.
Yeah.
Now you're not $900 a month, $600 a month isn't going out the house to pay for something that sits in the driveway most of the time, or on the street, or in a parking lot.
Well, even to take it a step further, and it might not be possible too easily for many people, but even look at if you want to buy a home, if you can pay off a home, now that's going to be much more difficult than paying off for a car. But be closer enough, you know, put a sizable down payment on. Don't just get the bare minimum. People sometimes like to just get the 3 or 5% minimum just to get, you know, into the position to say that you have the mortgage. But aim for the 20% where you're not paying mortgage insurance. I mean, you have to do what you have to do when it all comes down to it.
You can do that though.
Yeah.
You can do what you're suggesting. You have to make some sacrifices. So you can't run out with the minimum. Means you're going to have to wait a little bit, but save some more money. You might get a part-time job and use the part-time job strictly for the down payment on the house. Once you get that money saved up, save every dime from the part-time job. And once you get that money saved up, now you've got. But people have to think, proactively, and they have to be less consumption addicted. And you'd be surprised what you can get away with.
Exactly.
You know.
You want the latest iPhone or the latest phone that comes out, you know, $1,000 now is 2 phones. I mean, I got a second phone too, but it's not expensive. But the latest iPhone that comes out every year, you know, $1,000. Now you're paying Samsung top of the line Galaxy phone, $1,500. You know, so yeah, you know how you spend your money, how you save your money, how you invest your money. I mean, that got to be looked into definitely as a big part of the solution.
I got Motorola. Mine's a Motorola Moto G something. I think. Yeah, I think it was $150.
That's not bad at all.
No, I have 3 phones.
Okay.
I only use one.
You only use one.
But I have 3 that I use depending upon what the broadcast demands are. They're all paid for. They don't have service.
Right.
I have Boost Mobile.
Yeah, like me.
And before that, I had Virgin Atlantic, which I really, really liked. But, you know, they sold and then it sold and now it's Boost. And if I need those other phones, I turn them on.
Yeah.
And if I don't use them, they're off right now. I'd have to get me another number. But this one, it's Boost. You pay a little monthly fee. There's no contract.
That's what
And
I
if
do.
push come to shove, I won't have a phone.
Yeah.
But people have to live within their means. I don't understand how anyone needs a $1,200 phone.
Right.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't understand that. That is a waste of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then want to get the next phone when it comes out. They're just buying phones.
Yeah, and if you got a phone bill, if you're paying $200 a month at times, whatever contract you have, I mean, that's another thing. So again, your saving habits and your investment habits is something that you have to be able to really be in control of. And but the one area I still wanted to talk about is the low home ownership rate in Hartford, because Mayor Luke Bronin and I guess city leaders are trying to fix this problem, because I think they see it as a serious problem.
I think they do see it as a serious problem, but I wonder how really serious they are, considering that most of the people in the city of Hartford rent. That means that most of the places where people live are rental units. Those rental units are owned by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So if everyone moved out of a rental unit into a home, where would they move? Considering there are no new homes in Hartford. They may put up 10 homes here, 3 homes over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not home ownership initiative.
Mm-hmm.
You could call it that, but that's not what that is.
So the process, you have to start building. You're saying
Where are you gonna build them? In Bushnell Park? I mean, where's the land to build all these new homes in Hartford? It doesn't exist.
Well, one mistake they could be making is even with the Westbrook Village. They have a lot of land space there, and all of their building there is just, rental units. I mean, townhome style homes. And they still have a lot of open space to do additional building.
Can you buy any of those?
I don't think so right now. I think it's all rental.
All rental. So if they're building rental units, downtown's all rental units, right?
Yeah.
So if they're building rental units, where's the real initiative for home ownership?
Well, maybe before they didn't see it as a good return in investment. This Westbrook Village was planned a few years ago, so I don't know if this just came up out of the blue sky, targeting, I think, the Frog Hollow section of the city. They got some type of grant monies that came through, most likely helping you with your down payment and your closing costs. But again, where's the space at? Where's the homes at? You may see some homes for sale, but that's not going to add up to a lot, though. I mean, you have to actually build homes directly just for, home ownership.
Right. So if a home is for sale and the homeowner in that building sells it to another homeowner,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't increase home ownership. It may increase the number of people. If this person selling the home is white and this person selling the home is black,
Mm-hmm.
now we have another black person who owns a home. Those numbers might go up.
Yeah.
But the number of homeowners doesn't, because there's only so many homes that can be owned, and the ones that are owned are owned.
Our own, yeah.
So where's 1,000 new homeowners in new homes in Hartford? They may be new, but home ownership in Hartford didn't go up because there's only so many homes in Hartford. Unless, of course, there's a lot of abandoned homes.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I think they play games with that. And, of course, it looks good optically to stand in front of a house and have a crowd and, do the old political thing. One thing we want to do is make sure that home ownership goes up in the city, because there's no greater dream than the American dream of owning a new home. So as we cut these ribbons on these new houses and this initiative, we see home ownership increase. There's a disparity gap between those who, the BIPOC community and the average, the regular community, in terms of home ownership. We want to bring that gap down. And this initiative is a step in the right direction.
Right.
That sounds good, but doesn't mean anything.
Well, I mean, they have made strides with the Habitat of Humanity in the past.
Right. But Habitat for Humanity is to give homes to first-time homeowners in areas that are impacted by poverty most times. And so in Hartford, Habitat houses are houses that are generally rehabbed. There are some new Habitat houses.
Right.
Some of those are going to where houses were. They were torn down and they built new ones.
Right.
But by and large, there are not a whole lot of new houses going up. There are some, don't get me wrong, but not enough, in my opinion. It's just Stan's opinion don't mean nothing. Just Stan's opinion. I don't see where you're going to have this massive increase that you're going to put a real dent in increasing home ownership, because I don't see that. I don't see where. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to get out more, but I don't see where there's this huge number of new homes that are where the population of Harvard is going to increase by 3,000 people who have new homes that they own.
Well, I mean, like I say, first of all, you need to get the land space developed in the area of the city where you can even start building homes to be sold as homeowners. And really, that first step hasn't really gone anywhere. Again, the Westbrook Village, the new park, I guess it's called Park River. What they call it, the Westbrook Village. It's another name for it. It's not Westbrook. Park View or something they call it. Park. I don't know. I can't remember the exact name. But whatever the case, that open space, if you were starting to develop that towards home ownership and saying the next phase of the property, and it could be, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they might have another phase that they're going to build just for home ownership. I think the last time I spoke to someone there, they said it was going to be a rental stage, so I don't think that's going to be the case.
Now, there's new owners down by those are homes down by Colt. Not over by Coltville, but you come down Willis Street and you turn by the Episcopal Church, Good Shepherd Church. Those homes over there that Eddie helped initiate when he was mayor, those are homes. You could buy those.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure those are homes.
And what
about Stowe Village? Are those are homes?
Those are homes now. The new Stowe Village.
Yeah.
But I think we're missing something.
What about Bowles Park?
Those are rental.
Those are rental by
They may
Weaver.
have some.
Those are all rental.
Yeah, those are mostly rental. But there could be some in the next phase. But the ones that's there now is just a rental phase. You have a space though actually to build homes there in the back section. But we're missing something. I think. Do people want to really buy a home in the city? I think if the demand was really strong, it could push the need
to development, and it wouldn't take government initiatives.
Right.
The profit to be made would push the development.
So there's a reason why people don't really want or didn't want to push the demand to buy homes in the city. Hartford went through different phases of different decades. We lost a lot of population in the 60s, the 70s. We increased some in the 80s because you had a lot of immigrations coming into the city. Then we lost another phase in the 90s. A lot of people moved out to the suburbs. The 2000s are kind of leveled off. I don't know where it's at now. And again, it comes down to people have to live someplace. So the rental market is going to be needed because at the end of the day, regardless of whether you want to own or don't want to own, you have to have a place to live. And it would assume that it's more easier to fit into the rental market than the home ownership market because the requirements would be a little bit more stricter.
And everyone doesn't want to own a home.
Right. But if you do want to own a home and you're deciding that I want to own a home, but I don't want to own a home in Hartford, I think that's where you need to really target the solution towards.
Well, it could be that people are moving out of Hartford to own a home in Bloomfield, in Windsor,
That's what
in
I'm
West
saying.
Hartford, in New Britain, in East Hartford, in Manchester.
Right. Why they don't want to. Now, if you don't have the home stock availability, I understand that part. Clearly, you can't wait until they build something and you need a place now. But I think there's other factors why people don't want to become homeowners in the city of Hartford. Now, the school system is going to always be a main factor. I've heard that a lot from people that was leaving the city. They just couldn't deal with the school system.
Well, I've actually talked to people who just the opposite. They moved to Hartford specifically because Harvard had a diverse population and they wanted their kids to be more exposed to that diversity. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the reasons why they moved to Harvard. I've had that conversation with several people.
Right. That's true.
So I guess it all depends. But that would make a great show in terms of having somebody come who's an expert in real estate and the trends in where people are moving to and why.
Yeah.
You know, so we could know, like, are they really moving? And someone who doesn't have a vested interest in a particular narrative, they're going to tell us the truth about it. Mm-hmm. You know, why are people, is home ownership in Hartford increasing relative to first-time home owners? Because first-time home ownership is different than an increase in first-time home owners is different than increase in home ownership. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean?
Right.
Well, and so I it would be interesting to have somebody come and talk about that, and relative to are people leaving Hartford for the suburbs, and where are people that are moving into Hartford coming from? Because there's a lot of people in Hartford because of the pandemic that moved here from like New York and stuff.
Right.
Are they staying or are they going back to the city?
Right. Well, that would be a good, interesting show to have. I mean, honestly, I'm booked up for the month, so I'm not going to be able to get that show within the.
If you get that show, Jonathan, we do it on a Tuesday or a Thursday.
So you want to show design of home ownership and where people are moving?
Yeah, the trend, the trends in terms of people moving in and out of Hartford and the surrounding suburbs, relative to home ownership, first-time home ownership, and what is the motivation for all that?
Okay, so that will have to be a special. All right,
I'll do a special.
Okay.
Yeah, either Tuesday or a Thursday. Tuesday might be. No. Tuesday could work.
You don't do a show on Tuesday or Thursday.
No, we don't do a live show on Tuesday or Thursday. We could always do a live special.
Right.
Those are my off days. But we could do a live I'd be willing to do a live special. The last Tuesday of the month can be a challenge. So
okay.
I prefer not the last Tuesday of the month because there's a lot of pre-production stuff that has to be done for a shoot on the last Tuesday.
Well, the thing about it, man, you know, my old street, Cleveland Avenue. Okay, I could ask you why, if you had your choice, and I had the house, it's not my house. I never owned it. So if I was going to sell it, would you be interested? What would I have to do to convince you to move to my old street, Cleveland Avenue, comparable if you could move to Windsor, Marshall Phelps Road?
Well, if you move Cleveland Avenue to Windsor, Marshall Phelps Road, then I would move to Cleveland Avenue.
Move to Cleveland Avenue. So
that's no slight to anybody who lives on Cleveland Avenue.
Right. But it's not, Marshall Phelps Road. But again, I think the school system is a big factor. I think the everyday quality of life is a big factor. Mm-hmm. You can bring the price down to a level now to say, well, you could get it for this price. You don't have to double your price in Windsor. But some people just feel like, hey, it's more for them to be in Windsor or other surrounding towns than Hartford.
Yeah, I wouldn't move to Marshall Feltsboro. I would like Hartford.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. If I had to move, I would want an older house that was rehabbed over a new house, because I'm not very sold on the construction of new houses. And, if you go look at some of the new houses after 10, 15 years,
the older houses are very constructed well.
There's a whole nother mindset and craftsmanship and work ethic that went into building older houses than the new houses. And the new houses are seemingly put up as fast as you can with the minimum necessary. And they just don't seem to be built like the old stock.
Well,
and that's what Hartford has. And to me, that is irreplaceable. So, upgrading the electric. So I think before I would buy a new house, I would move into an old house
and remodel it
and rehab it.
Rehab it, yes.
I would upgrade. Let me not say rehab. I would upgrade and rehab. Yeah, let me say rehab. Rehab the old house.
Well, definitely you got to upgrade your lighting, your
lighting,
work and things
water,
like that. Water, sewage, yeah,
and air systems. But the solidness of the old house. If you get a house with great foundation, that's what I'd be looking for in Hartford.
Yeah, and the character they had really made them with the foundation. I mean, to really last, strong, durable. I mean, if you take a look even at the new Stowe Villages, I mean, it has maybe some of it has to do with how the people are maintaining the properties too. But even over the last 20 years, I looked at some interior photos and it doesn't look all that. I mean, a home that was built or finished in 2000 shouldn't look the way I seen some of your homes in the Stowe Village.
Yeah. You and I are observing the same thing. I didn't observe them in Stowe Village, but just houses are 20 years old that shouldn't look the way they look.
Right.
Run down, the leaning, porches sagging, wood all deteriorated.
That's what I seen.
Just because of the quality of the wood. What kind of wood are they using?
Right.
Particle board that's now taking on water and just bad quality.
Now, with all fairness, I mean, it's going to cost you much more money. You have some builders, I can't remember the builder name in South Windsor, because I know someone that lives in South Windsor, and this contractor builds excellent new construction, but you're going to be paying quite a bit of money for it too.
New,
yeah.
Okay, ground up.
Okay. In South Windsor, it's a family business or some type of company that builds new construction, but they build excellent housing stock. And I just know they are based out of South Windsor. But again, that should be taking place all over the state. I mean, new construction, but it will cost you much more money now. The top builder, like this builder, what name is Desano or some name? It's a contract. I'll look it up and find it. But again,
it might be interesting to talk to them.
Right.
Yeah.
But housing is a big issue. I think it's an issue sometimes people don't really look at, clearly enough to say it's not that much of a big deal. But home ownership rate, sometimes it builds more commitment to the city, more stability. The old saying is not an excuse that if you own it, you take care of it more.
That's got true.
More.
That's very true.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of benefits of looking at home ownership. Now, if you got problems with the school system and other areas that you don't feel satisfied, you're paying more in taxes. Although you hear people in the surrounding towns claim that they pay quite a bit in taxes too. So I don't know what's the trade-off. But home ownership rate being last and low percentage that Hartford has, I think that is a big issue in the city. And then again, increasing it, how does that affect your overall economic impact of your city? I mean, it's strange, but I guess it's not a big difference if you drive on Bloomfield Avenue. You're in Hartford, one home. The next home, you're in West Hartford. Then your next further down, you're in Bloomfield. The homes look the same to me. So, and I think you would be paying about the same price. I think if you're driving up Albany Avenue and you're getting into Terry Road and you're getting closer to the borderline, you see some of them big homes, you're probably going to be paying what you would be paying in West Hartford too. I don't think it's a big drop. Because if that was the case.
In terms of taxes?
Well, in terms of just the home price itself.
Oh, purchase of the home.
Taxes, I don't know about. I don't know what the difference is.
The prices of home depend upon the house itself.
Yeah.
And the willingness and what it can command in the market.
Mm.
You know, you could have a nice old house, but the plumbing is the same as it's always been. The electricity hasn't been upgraded. And so you have to find the right person that wants that style of house and doesn't need fixing. If it has a slate roof, you know, slate roofs are very difficult to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very, very expensive to maintain, and they're exceedingly expensive to replace. So there are a lot of things that can make a house difficult to sell unless you have the right person who has a lot of money and wants to live in Hartford.
Yeah.
Relative to West Hartford. So you could get there's a lot of different factors. That's why I say it would be nice to get an expert in here to talk about that. They can answer all of those questions with certainty.
Because again, I mean, if you say you can get a home in Hartford for half the price that it would be in West Hartford, we're not talking a long distance. I mean, you could be from West Hartford to Hartford in a few minutes, give or take. Now, I understand the school system is a big factor. So, but again, you stay in Hartford, you pay for private schooling, you're going to be paying. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that I can't say 100% for sure. I think the school system is one big important factor. I think maybe your tax structure, what you're getting in services has to be looked at. Public safety, you can throw that every day. But if you live in a good area, I don't think Terry Road and that part, although that's so close to Upper Albany Avenue, it's hard to say. But
Terry Road is considered one of the upscale
parts of the city.
Parts of the city.
Right. So I don't think you're going to have the everyday nuisance.
No, you don't have other than the fact that what they have, home robbers might be interested in.
Might be interested in your
people
home.
rob homes that have stuff.
Right. Because you are close.
Scarborough, Terry Road, all that up in there.
Mm-hmm.
Those are expensive houses.
Mm-hmm.
Because the neighborhood is seen as being somewhat exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make a certain amount of money to be able to afford to live there, not just because the house may cost you to buy, but also the maintenance of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you've got lawn to take care of. There's just general maintenance on the house. Houses cost money.
Yeah.
To maintain, you have to take care of that house. Now, a lot of what we were talking about in terms of housing, if the house isn't maintained, like if the porch isn't painted
mm-hmm.
and the wood sealed, it'll cause that kind of deterioration.
Oh, okay.
So if people are moving into houses and they've spent every last dime they have to be able to get the mortgage and get in the house,
mm-hmm.
and they've borrowed everything they can borrow from family, friends, and foe, and they go into the house almost broker than broke.
Right.
And now they can't afford to maintain the house. If they need to roof.
Yeah.
If it needs a major paint job on the exterior. Driveway, so you forego those things, and then as we were talking earlier, inflation starts eating away at your dollars. You
need to be able to afford the house and maintain. It's almost like a car too,
right? You buy expensive cars you can't afford to fix, or it's temperamental. and it requires a lot of stuff.
Well, everything is, I mean, you would think being pre-qualified, that would get you the position, can you really afford a home? I mean, if you're not pre-qualified and you don't have the money to buy it outright in cash, then, you know, there's a reason why banks want you to be pre-qualified.
Well, they're interested in selling the house and writing the mortgage.
Right.
Writing the mortgage for the bank because they make money off the mortgage. And then the homeowner is interested in selling the house, and the real estate interest is interested in closing the deal. Mm-hmm. Now that you have your house, you're on your own.
You're on your own.
But because you did everything you could just to afford to purchase the house or secure the house, which someone's going to own for the next 30 years until you pay off the mortgage, how are you going to pay for stuff?
Right.
I mean, you know, there's electricity, there's water. Those prices may go up. Fuel oil or gas.
Yeah.
Tree branch broke through the window or hit the porch, caved in the side of the porch. You fell behind on your insurance payment because you're trying to make sure you had fuel this winter because the price of fuel doubled. And so now your insurance kind of took a hit, even though you thought it was baked into the mortgage price. There's all kinds of different things that can put a strain on you. Or, God forbid, you bought the house 2 years before the pandemic, and now you're out of work.
Right.
So, you know, there are a lot of things that go into home ownership.
Yeah. It's a real big important decision that you have to know what you're getting into and what. And
I'm not trying to throw water on the parade. You know, I have owned 2 houses. I'm not a big fan of owning a house right now.
Right.
So that some of my bias might be coming out.
But however you want to look at it, you still need a place to live. Whether it's owning a home, renting a home, I guess those are your options though. Either own or rent.
Own or rent.
And rent, can
or
be
sleep in the park.
Yeah. Well, that's homeless when you don't have a place.
Home, rent, or tent.
Right. Well, like I mentioned last week, you're hearing more about tiny homes now. People sleeping in their RVs.
Shacks, tiny homes.
Yeah. You know, that's not the traditional way of people living. But people are looking at other alternatives, living in a camper or RV. I mean, I guess
that is an alternative. I had a guy at Pratt Whitney when I first started. He lived in an RV. Mm-hmm. Saved up. He had all kinds of money.
Well, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. I mean, you can make some pros of living in an RV. There's some cons of living in an RV. But home ownership, I think that is something that people need to examine and look at. And, you know, it's most likely a benefit when you have it for your community and your city.
Well, you know, some of the pros are, and it creates a more stable community because people have ownership. Mm-hmm. But the stability has to come. I think that stability is a manifestation of the individuals that live there having a stable job. Something that they see themselves in for the next 20 years, next 30 years, staying in Hartford. What are the jobs in Hartford that provide that kind of stability? Mm-hmm. In a time when things are becoming more and more, you know, when workers are not thinking in those terms anymore. So I think we still are in the midst. I don't think we've totally transitioned to the new paradigm. Before, those jobs were anchored. Those homes were anchored around jobs like Pratt and Whitney, Standardine, Vita Root, Colt. Manufacturing where you could work for 30 years,
right,
and retire.
Yeah.
Now, young people think in terms of working 10 years at the most. 5 years, they're moving on to something else.
Right.
So because they're chasing after their dreams and the places that provide those long-term jobs just aren't there anymore, I don't know if people are all cracked up just to be anchored down by a 30-year debt.
Yeah, see, that's another thing. I mean, I would much be in favor of a 15-year mortgage than a 30-year mortgage. I understand it's a lot less to get in the home with a 30-year mortgage, but I think if you
And the payments are higher with the 15-year.
it is higher, but the intention is to pay off the home quicker too.
Right.
I mean, there's going to be a trade-off for it.
Well, anyone can pay down the price of the mortgage at any time. If you could pay it off in 5 years, it'd be all better.
Right.
That's a lot of money coming out in 5 years, though. But if you could pay it off in 5 years, then you'd have ownership of the house and you could sell it for a profit.
But see, it gets back to what type of home that you're looking to buy. I mean, if you can afford a $400,000 home or you can afford a $100,000 home. I mean, a $100,000 home, you're going to have to put some work into it. Usually when you get a home that doesn't cost that much, like a car, there's some work that has to be done on it at some point. You know, there's a reason why the home is only selling for $80,000. It's not just because either they can't get rid of the home. It's in some bad high crime area. The home got a lot of issues. So, you know, which way you want to turn? You pay more. You're gonna run. Everybody can't pay for $400,000, $200,000. Even double of what a home value would be. You might think it doesn't make a difference, but it actually adds up very quickly. Some people are contractors. They know how to do work, so you buy a home a lot less. You can do the labor work yourself. Either you could flip it or you could live in it yourself. So there's a lot of dynamics that goes into it. But, you know, people got to make enough money and be stable with your income. You don't want to buy a home and lose it. Because you can't keep up the payments, you can't keep up the taxes. So, and where you buy a home is still important too. It's a big commitment. It's a big investment.
Huge commitment.
And you got to know what you're doing too. You really got to know what you're doing. But again, that would be an interesting show. So let's kind of work on that and see what we can do. And the bigger picture, though, again, you know, the problems that exist in our state. Let's not paint a negative picture on one incident. You know, what took place at Weaver. I mean, it could be more than that, though. Like, that's the thing. I just don't know. So I don't want to speculate too much more about that incident.
Well, let's see if we can find out a little bit of what happened so we can report to the community. We'll
see what you and Luis and Dr. Bowden, y'all can come up with. Maybe y'all might know something by Wednesday. If not, then we'll just wait and see. I mean,
I'm sure on Wednesday this will be a topic of discussion.
All right.
But Brother Luis, absolutely. He called me and told me about it.
Oh, he did?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
When it was happening. So, yeah, I'm sure he'll let me know.
He'll let you know.
And you all out there as well. Well, Jonathan, thank you, sir. Great interview.
All right. Thank you, too.
Interview. Special thanks to our guest, Will Curry, for stopping by and sharing his wisdom with us. And you guys, will see you all next time. So you all go and have a fabulous rest of your day. I'm going to spend my day with my 13-year-old daughter, who's 13 today. It's her birthday. So happy birthday, Jessica. All right. I mean, Jesus.
7?
7.
All right.
I get my kids mixed up.
Jessica, your oldest.
Jessica's the oldest. Happy birthday, 7 Grace. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.